Within the Norse communities, Odin can be a very divisive character, even polarizing at times. And what I'm about to discuss will bring forward an even more controversial nature as we explore the multicultural history of Odin. I'm Kedrick Olson, author of Runes for Transformation and founder of Galdracraft. For the past 30 years, I've been poring through the Norse literature in the original languages to better understand the mindset and the mysticism and the magical practices and spirituality of the ancient Norse people so that I can bring their wisdom forward to the 21st century in ways that are practical for you to use to improve your life and to expand your spiritual workings. So Odin does have a bad name, kind of a bad rep within the lore, and in modern times, that's actually gotten a little bit worse for some people. And so we need to take a dive into the archaeology and the literature to understand where Odin came from and really what he meant to the ancient Norse people. When we look to the texts from the Norse people and from the cultures that encountered the Norse people, yes, there were some violent clashes. Yes, the Vikings do have a history of being brutal and very warlike in their nature. However, there is a greater body of literature and a greater body of archaeological evidence that shows that these Norse explorers were actually peaceful, they were intelligent, they were well educated, and they were very xenophilic, which means they loved to learn about other cultures. They embraced the ways of other peoples, languages, clothing, artifacts. This becomes very apparent when we find grave finds of some of these explorers in other lands. And one of the places that comes to mind is the Helgö treasure in Sweden. In this grave, dating to about the 5th or 6th century AD, we find a Buddha. And we even find a christening scoop from Egypt. Sure, fine. One grave has a Buddha, one grave find has something from Egypt. Doesn't tell us too much, right? But why would these things be in somebody's grave if it wasn't valuable and important to them? And maybe, just maybe, these were the spoils of war, the spoils of raiding. Sure, fine. Not likely. And I believe archaeologists and anthropologists would disagree that these were the spoils of war, but that's okay. Let's take a look at something else from the history that if these materials were obtained through warfare, they would not have been a constant flow of resources to the Norse people. And what we find is the Ulfberht sword, dating to the 9th to 11th century. There's a great documentary on this one about where the steel came for these swords, these great swords. And it turns out these were Arabic steel, made crucible style, Arabic crucible steel that only could have been obtained through amicable trade. Not stealing, not warfare, not raiding, but amicable trade, which means that these were viable trade routes between the Norse people and the Arabic people of the Middle East. That could only come from open cultures, people agreeing to meet on common terms. An absolutely vital thing for the survival of civilizations of that time period and today. So fine, maybe that's not convincing enough of the xenophilic nature of the Norse people. So let's look to their own words themselves, specifically the Heimskringla and the Prose Edda, both by Snorri Sturluson. First, we'll look to the Gylfaginning, the deluding of Gylfi, where King Gangleri disguises himself to learn more about the gods, more about the mysteries of the world. And in section 20 of the Gylfaginning, A list of names of Odin is recited for Gangleri, as well as some of Odin's accomplishments and deeds. And Gangleri asks, why does Odin have so many different names? Why does he have all of these things that he's called by? And Har responds to Gangleri thusly: as there are many tongues in the world, so all peoples thought they ought to turn his name into their tongue, in order that they may be able to worship him and pray to him, each in its own language. Hold on a minute here. Odin traveled the world visiting people of different cultures that spoke different languages, bringing his wisdom with him, and they each call him a name in their own tongue, in their own way. Think about that. If that's not a multicultural history of Odin, of some being who can travel the world bringing wisdom to all parts of the place, including the North, and he doesn't care what culture he's teaching. And you call him God. You call him Allfather. You call him Valfather. Let's continue with this. We go to the Heimskringla, specifically the Ynglinga Saga, section 2, called The People of Asia, where it says, the country east of the Tanaquissil in Asia was called Alsaland, or Asaheim, and the chief city in that land was called Alsgard. In that city was a chief called Odin, and it was a great place for sacrifice. Odin was a great and very far-traveled warrior who conquered many kingdoms, and so successful was he that in every battle the victory was on his side. So there you have it. In the words of the Norse ancestors themselves, Odin was a far-traveled warrior coming from Asia, from the Far East, to bring his wisdom to many different lands, and into the North he came. Well, there's something interesting here. If we look to the Far East, to the Vedic people in India, we find that they actually have two types of deities. There's the higher deities, the devas, the ones that they worship the most. And then there is another form of deity, maybe a more rebellious, more of a bit of a breakaway type of deity, that they call the asuras. And interestingly enough, the asuras traveled the world, bringing their wisdom, bringing their knowledge, and were considered far-traveled warriors, conquering different lands, bringing their wisdom and their abilities to these different lands. And interestingly enough, scholars of Sanskrit and of Old Norse will point to a common Indo-European language from which both the word asura in Sanskrit and the word Aesir in Old Norse are descendant. This is to suggest that the asuras in India, in ancient India, are one and the same as the Aesir of the Norse. Again, we have a third very strong example of the multicultural aspect of Odin. We have archaeology of a xenophilic people exploring, trading, and yes, raiding with many different cultures. We have the words of the Norse themselves saying that Odin came from many different places, teaching many different people of many different languages. And we have the word Aesir in common with the Vedic deities of India, the Asuras. Three different things point to the multicultural aspects of Odin. So what does this tell us about the ancient ancestors? It tells us that they were definitely a xenophilic people that embraced the cultures, the traditions, and the wisdom from many other different lands, from many other different people. They willingly traded. They willingly shared their knowledge with these people. And they knew it was vital for their survival that they be open and accepting. And guess what? Nothing's changed today. If our ancestors were open and accepting of people of different cultures, then we can best honor their memory. We can best honor the path that they laid for us, that we walk today, treading forward into the future, by willing to embrace and accept and understand people of different cultures, no matter what that culture is, no matter who they are. In fact, our very strength relies on the fact that we can hold ground and be open, just like our ancestors did, just like Odin did. How will you honor the ancestors? By being open, accepting, understanding, or rejecting? It's up to you. Hail to you all.